Pretty nice little makeshift building, huh?
Right.
Oh, great. They're done all right. Yeah.
There's audience.
I'm just trying to get some with 4G. What they call it? What's that? What they call it? No, just fine. We didn't get it. What is? Oh, I see. Okay, I have 6 o'clock. Are we all ready? If so, call the meeting order of the Utilities Committee of January 17th, 2023. We could all rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible. Thank you. Let the record reflect that both Councilperson Hagwig and Councilperson Winkle, members of the committee, and myself are present. Also in attendance this evening is Councilperson Jacobs, DeVries, Swank, and Avens, Assistant Clerk Ridgeville, French Creek Supervisor Corey Timko, American Corcoran, City Service Director Jeff Armbruster, Finance Director April, Engineer Christina, Law Director Brian Moriarty, and Utilities Director Tara Pete. Did I miss anyone other than our guests, which I'll have the mayor introduce? Okay, excellent. First order of agenda on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to, or are there any corrections or additions that need to be made to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. Under new business, the first item on the agenda is the French Creek rate study, which is listed under T7 2023, an ordinance increasing the wholesale rate of wastewater treatment services provided by the French Creek wastewater treatment plant. With that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Corcoran.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Every 5 years or so, we go through a rate study. Mainly you've seen it mostly on French Creek, and AECom has been involved in that from the very beginning, I believe.
For a while, at least for the past, I think the last 10 years.
Okay. As long as I thought.
No, not since the very beginning, but I think we were around the second generation.
Okay. You mentioned it, if you remember somebody else, but anyway. Scott and his team, Justine actually, works on putting this rate study together. We take a look at all of the different projects that we're looking to accomplish at the plant and essentially try to figure out how to pay for them. So that's what the study does. I'll let them take over from there. And I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. We have lots of answers. Let's bring it on. Let's go.
You want to speak from here or?
Wherever you
So thank you everyone for having us here tonight to discuss this. Just a quick little summary. When I became superintendent of the French Creek plant in 2013, a lot of the systems were older. The plant was built in 76, and some of the systems, the filter systems, there's 7 major systems that were there that were in various forms of need of repair and upgrade. Suffice it to say, every system that you had out there, you've gotten more than your useful life. So in 2013, we had a failing UV system that was not in compliance. So we did the disinfection UV system upgrade. Then we did the next system that was failing was the grid system. Then we went over and we did the filter system. And so we continued to move from system to system and rebuild the plant. Upcoming, we have a major CM project upgrade, which has to do with the aeration. We have a sludge storage hut. We place our sand filters in the back. We have some water line upgrades. The water lines out there are all corroded, so that we've done half the plant, now we're doing another half. Doing the screens, removing the screens. There's a constant flooding problem out there. And then finally, we're going to be doing the pumps project in 2025. So you're going to see us walk through each one of those systems. There was a delay with COVID. We had a little bit of a delay, and because of that, the contractors got backed up and all the projects got backed up. So now everything's starting to move as normal. Supply chain's getting back. Instead of a year and a half wait, we've got 6 to 8 months, which is normal. So you're going to see us discussing how we're going to fund all those projects, and then how the rate study look at our just general O&M costs, our salaries, the chemicals, all the routine materials and supplies that we use just to keep the plant running on top of those capital projects that I just announced. So Justine Rose was the primary person who orchestrated this for us out of AECom. She did the study. She did it in a lot of consultation with April and myself. So we had some input and all that. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and turn that over to her, because she put together the PowerPoint and she can walk us through the study, and then we can answer questions. Come on up, Justine. Let's see, is this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori, for that introduction. And thank you, Mayor Copeland, for introducing us. All right, so the French Creek wastewater treatment plant rate study update. So here's a general agenda for our meeting today. We're going to have an overview of the project. We're going to talk about our general assumptions. We're going to go over our alternatives, the different alternatives that we considered, and then we're going to present our summary and conclusions. So for our overview, here are some goals. These are the issues that we're trying to address. So we want to make sure we are sustaining funds 670 and 680 over the long term. We want to make sure that we can fund the capital improvement program, or the CIP. We want to identify a debt service strategy, and we want to make sure that we have sufficient reserves for debt service coverage or for emergencies. And we want to confirm that our assumptions are providing a good forecast moving forward. A few goals for our meeting today. We're going to present some background data, go over our assumptions, confirm the CIP needs, present that. We're going to discuss our debt service strategy moving forward. We're going to present our recommended alternative, and then we're going to respond to any issues or questions anyone might have. So a few of our data sources: we reviewed previous studies and reports, the auditor's financial budget and reports, including the debt service schedule and the French Creek operating reports. We had several interviews with city officials, with April and with Corey. And we looked at the proposed capital improvement program. I think I already said that, the operating reports. A few recent trends that we want to highlight. We're seeing some reductions in new connections and tap fees, basically starting from 2020, likely as a result of the pandemic. We're seeing some higher projected O&M costs due to a number of factors, including inflation. We're seeing high levels of capital investment. Like Corey was talking about, we want to make sure that we're keeping French Creek in good condition. So we've got a lot of ongoing projects. And there's also some pending debt issuance. There are some upcoming projects where we may need to issue some debt. All right, so let's go over the use of the funds. 670 is our repository for consumption revenues, and we use it as the source for operating expenses. We also use it as the source to transfer funds into Fund 670 and 680. Fund 675 is our debt service fund, and we use that for all the debt service payments. Fund 680 is our repair and improvement fund, and it's the repository for any connection charges. And then any loan or bond proceeds will go into Fund 680. We also use it as the source for funding for the capital improvement program. All right, and then here are some of our goals. Moving forward, for 670, our operating fund, we want a 6-month reserve at the close of each year so that in case of upcoming emergencies, like a pandemic, we'll be able to fund the 6 months. 670, we want to maintain funds to cover any debt service payments for the following year. And then for Fund 680, we want to maintain enough funds to cover CIP for the following year. And we also want to keep some funds in that in Fund 680 in order to cover any upcoming unseen costs. All right, so I'm going to do a quick overview of some of our assumptions. I'm not going to go over these in too much detail because we don't have all night. But I'm going to highlight some of the more important assumptions and items that have changed or increased. But a detailed description can be found in the report. All right, so here's some revenue assumptions for Fund 670. We are assuming that consumption revenues will be escalated at 2% per year, and that is on top of the rate increase. IPT surcharge and lab charges, those are escalated at 2% per year. Rental fees are $18,000 per year. Leachate fees, we were seeing leachate fees at about $200,000 per year, but those will cease beginning in 2023. And then the interest income had been estimated at 1.5% per year. Moving forward, we're going to estimate that at 1% per year because of the current economic. Some expense assumptions. These are kind of a couple of items that I want to highlight that have changed. So for, oh, sorry, that is the next slide. So for expense assumptions, generally what we did was we took costs, we estimated the costs for 2022 from the 2022 budget and included encumbrance from 2021. And that is because we don't have the final costs for 2022 yet. Those are still being reviewed by the auditor. The costs for 2023 were estimated using the 2023 budget. We had that already in place, so we just stuck those numbers in. Salary and benefits are predicted to escalate at 3% per year, starting with the funds, with the estimated cost from 2023. And then on average, most of the costs were estimated by averaging the previous 5 years and then escalating that at 2% per year. So here are a few items that I want to highlight that may have changed over the past few years. So for chemicals, there are some improvements that were made to French Creek in order to increase efficiency, and those updates require different chemicals. So that was the reason for an increase in cost. And we estimated that they would increase by about $60,000 in 2022. And then we are estimating that cost to increase by 5% per year instead of the regular 2% just because of inflation and some supply chain issues. Engineering service costs, those are costs that can vary year to year, so it's really difficult to pull an average. So the cost for 2023 was taken from the 2023 budget, and we are escalating that at 2% per year from 2023 rather than for the previous 5 years. Outside lab services is another one that changed. Those services included the costs for Bojan lab starting in 2022. So those costs were pulled from the budget and escalated from 2023. Escalated at 2% per year. Electricity costs, that was another cost that where you've kind of seen it go up and down over the past few years. You can see that they changed. There were some upgrades to the plant, which increased efficiency. And so those costs were actually lower in 2020 and 2021, but they're going to be renegotiated in April of this year. So we're using a figure from the 2023 budget in order to estimate costs moving forward. And then our equipment, that's a cost that's used for smaller repairs that are done in-house, or that French Creek can hire out directly. And so that is also pulled from the 2023 budget and escalated from 2023 moving forward. Capital outlay costs, those are costs that are budgeted over the next few years for needed equipment. There's a equipment list that's put together, a 5-year equipment list. And so in 2023, those costs are a little bit high compared to other years. That includes a dump truck, a displacement pump, SCADA server, PLC and VFD hardware, Ferris pumps, TV line camera, and RAS pump. There's a bunch of equipment, and then there's also equipment that is needed in 2024. And then moving forward, I believe we set that at 175,000 per year. All right, and then finally for Fund 670, we are assuming that at the end of each year, we're going to keep a 6-month O&M reserve in Fund 670, and then additional costs will be transferred to Fund 680, and the debt service costs will be transferred to Fund 675. And so at the close of each year, we are going to have a 6-month O&M reserve in Fund 670, and we're going to have the debt service cost for the next year in Fund 675. All right, so Fund 675, the revenue assumptions, we're assuming those transfers from Fund 670 that I mentioned, and we're assuming interest income estimated at 1%. And then the expense assumptions, we estimated that from the debt service schedule, and then from any potential loans that we may have to take out, we calculated those loans at a 5% interest rate over the next 20 years. Fund 680, the revenue assumptions, it's the repository for sewer tap fees, and sewer tap fees were relatively low in 2022. We had an estimated 274,000, and so previously we had estimated that those tap fees would increase by 2%, and then on top of that, we added the annual tap fee increase of 2.5%. In this study, we just estimated the increase at 2.5% for the annual tap fee increases, and we took out that additional 2%, just because we have not seen that same growth. Loan proceeds, again, as we mentioned, will be deposited into Fund 680. So any loans that we're taking out for future CIP, and then we will have the funds transferred into Fund 670, or from Fund 670 into Fund 680 for ongoing capital improvements. All right, and then this is an overview of the expense assumptions. I'm not going to go through each one, but these are the estimated costs for 2022. You can kind of see the biggest one is the disc filter expansion, and that cost included an encumbrance from 2021. For 2023, the biggest project that we're looking at is the CM tank blower. I apologize, it's a little small, so it's a little hard to see on the screen. But the CM tank blower is 6.7 million. 2024, the biggest project that we're looking at is the interceptor repairs, phase 3 interceptor repairs, and that is estimated at 1.3 million. 2025, we are assuming the 200 horsepower influent pump valve project at 4 million. 2026, the digester dome cover and scrubber project 1.8 million. And in 2027, we're looking at some roofing repairs at 700,000. All right, so our debt service strategy, debt may be issued this year for the CM tank blower project and in 2025 for the influent pump valve project. The city has actually applied for the water pollution control loan funding from the Ohio EPA, which offers below market interest rate. And this is a location of the project. All right, so an overview for the alternatives that we put together. So the first alternative that you can see in your reports, alternative 1 was the baseline, and that showed no rate increases and no loans. And what we found when we put that together was that Fund 680 would not support the planned capital improvement programs starting in 2023. And then we also started to see deficits in French Creek for all of the funds beginning in 2025. Now, these the names for these alternatives are a little bit strange. We did an initial iteration of alternatives, and we had initially decided on alternative 4. And then as we got some more information, we went through and we tweaked alternative 4. And so that is why they're actually called alternative 4, A, B, and C. So I apologize, that is a little bit confusing. So alternative 4 was the next one that we put together, and that was a 4% rate increase, and then a $6.7 million loan in 2023 for the CM tank blower project. But we did not show a second loan being taken out for the influent pump valve project. And what we found was that Fund 680 would not support the CIP beginning in 2025. We started to see deficits in Fund 680. So that told us that in order to support all of the planned CIP, the city will need to take on additional debt or have a higher rate increase. So alternative 4A1 and 4A2. Again, this is a little bit confusing, and I apologize for that. But the reason that we put these together, these were 2 options that French Creek got when they did some design pricing. So they decided to separate the influent pump valve project into 2 parts. There's going to be the wet well project and then the dry well project. And they're going to start with the wet well project. And then depending on what they learn from that, the project might be closer to 4 million or it might be closer to 5 million. So that's why we have both of these alternatives put together. So one shows a $4 million loan for the influent pump valve and one shows a $5 million loan. All right, and then alternative, so those were 4% rate increases and then loans for both of those projects. Alternative 4B was an 8% rate increase and then a loan for the CM tank blower, but not for the influent pump valve. And basically, we wanted to see if we took out a loan for the CM tank blower, but we did not take out any additional loans, how high would the rate increase have to be in order to support the capital improvement program? And so we found that we had to raise that rate up to 8%. And you know, we do end up supporting the CIP, but that might be a bit of sticker shock for ratepayers. Alternative 4C showed an 8% one-time rate increase in 2023, and then 4% rate increases per year in 2024 through 2027, and then a loan in 2023 for the CM tank blower project, and then another loan for the influent pump valve project. And so when we ran that, it left us in a fairly good position for the end of 2027 with Fund 680 at more than 2 million. However, again, the 8% might still be a sticker shock, even though it's only for 1 year. So based on all of our findings and conversations with city officials, the recommended alternative that we landed on was alternative 4A, either 1 or 2. This is an overview of what we get from alternative 4A1. So these are the end of year summaries. So one thing that I wanted to note is that we do see a negative net revenue for every year, except for 2025. But beyond 2027, we're basically doing all of the CIP that it looks like we need to do over the next several years. And so beyond 2027, there shouldn't be a lot of big projects that we see coming up. And so I think that we would be able to get back to positive net revenue, and we would be able to increase Fund 680 above 2 million, so that we have a little bit more of a cushion. And then that ends with 6 months of O&M reserve. And beyond 2027, we might want to look at increasing those months of O&M reserve up to potentially 9 months, just again to give us a little bit more of a cushion. All right, so summary and conclusions. So basically, our findings are a $6.7 million loan in 2023 for the CM tank blower project, and a $4 million loan in 2025 for the influent pump valve project, along with a continuation of that 4% rate increase, should allow French Creek to fully cover their capital improvement program schedules and O&M costs through 2027. This alternative, it gives us the 6-month O&M reserve at the close of each year, and a greater than $1 million balance in Fund 680 at the close of each year. I put down here the estimated new debt service payments. So the 517 would be for the CM tank blower project, and then the 318 would be for the influent pump valve project. Again, those were estimated at a 5% interest rate. Hopefully, if we are able to secure government loans, it may be a little bit less than 5%, but we don't necessarily know how the climate is going to look over the next few years. So in our estimates, we set them at 5%. Then here's a rate comparison. This is a rate comparison for a couple of local districts. You can see the sewer district has a cost of $11 per CCF, and then a fixed fee of $9.70. Avon Lake is $5.46 per CCF, although I think that they charge for 1,000 gallons, so that's just the conversion. And then they have a $23 minimum service. It's not an extra fee, but that's basically the minimum of what everyone would pay. Elyria is $10.25 per CCF with a fixed fee of $13.50, and then Avon $5.91 per CCF with a fixed fee of $1.99. But I want to make a quick note that it's not an exact comparison, because this rate doesn't include the local sewer system charges, and different districts charge according to the local sewers. And then I also included a rate forecast through 2027. So 2022, and I believe this is still current, the rate is 225. So by 2027, at that 4% increase, it would be 274, and that is per CCF. All right, that's all I've got.
Thank you. Can you go over the numbers on slide 7 one more time? I'll first turn over to the administration. Do you want any comments or?
Yeah, as you are might be aware, we already started down the path of that $6.7 billion loan. We passed legislation for that, allowing us to go out and get that loan. And we already have that project already budgeted for this year, along with some other things. So, we're already moving towards, working on and completing some of these projects that were mentioned. And as Corey pointed out in the beginning, we had an aging plant, and when Corey walked in, he's been systematically improving that and replacing things that have been there since '76. So, that's a long time. Plants don't last forever. The equipment doesn't last forever. We've had different floods in different spots that have wiped out some of our equipment, and we've had to replace. So, there's an effort underway to finish the second half of his plant improvements, and it's necessary. As you heard him say in the beginning, some of those systems failed. We can't have a failed plant. That creates all sorts of problems. So when we were looking at rate increases, we were trying to keep them as low as possible. You heard the 8% number thrown around. We were trying to keep it at 4% instead. And so, we're looking at borrowing some money and some more money in the future in order to complete these projects. Corey has said all along that, once he gets through this second half, these major projects that we've been incurring over these last,
2015, 10 years.
10 years, we should be done with them for a while, and they should last. If we've made it since '76 to this point, we should last for a long time after that. But all these things are being done to improve the plant, keep costs as much under control as we can, and make it the best plant that we can have. So
Thank you.
that's it.
Are there any questions from anyone on the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So as we're looking at numbers being projected, is it fair to assume on these numbers we're generating about $500,000 a year with the rate increase, and it kind of escalates a little bit? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see.
Roughly, that's just what it looks like to me, and it escalates as the rates go up.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And the charts that I included, the spreadsheets, it actually shows on separate lines, and I don't have a slide for it, unfortunately. But there's a separate line that is labeled rate increase revenue. And so I basically took the funds that we would see each year from the rate increase and put that in a separate line. Just to kind of make it a little bit easier to view, how much we should be getting from those rate increases.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
On that, Mr. Bruce, I wanted to point out that one of the reasons why our revenues have been decreasing, particularly in 2022, is because there's less houses being built, so there's less tap-ins, and so obviously, if we're having less revenue, that's going to dictate an increase in rates.
Right. If I could just build upon that point too, another major component of our revenue is wet weather. So last year was a fairly dry weather on the whole, so we were under average. Now, this year started out to be a wet year. January has been wet, so we can change 500,000 one way or another just based on how wet the weather is from the year.
Excellent, thank you. there any members of council that have any questions they'd like to pose? Yes.
So the 4% increase, is that per year for the next 5 years? So it's 4% this year, an additional 4% next year, an additional 4% the year after. And then once we hit this 2027, does that stay or do we decrease?
We would do another study. So these studies last for 5 years. So this is looking at that 5-year period. At some point in 2027, we'd be doing another study and coming up with whatever the rates may need to be going into the future.
So they're gonna increase the capacities 20% over the next 5 years.
Well, if you exclude compounding, yes, but it'll be a little bit higher if you include compounding. Because it's not just 4%, it's 4% on top of the previous 4%, so it's a little bit higher than that, but yes. And that's, again, just to pay for the operations and projects that we have, so it's not like we're just raising rates for the heck of it.
Well, right, but what I'm trying to understand is if we don't foresee any future projects, we're gonna still keep that 20% increase that you've done over the last 5 years. Guess is what I'm trying to do. But like I said, we do another rate study and they can come
Correct.
back and say decrease, right?
It's always possible, Holly, you know, we've never decreased rates here that I'm aware of, but what we did do with like their garbage collection rates, we had rate holidays when we're able to afford that, so, you know, but yeah, it's something that we would take a look at once these major projects are done. Then, you know, that rate would be adjusted at that time, but it could always go down. It depends on what's going on at that time. Who knows, chemicals could go up like 8,000%. You know, it's hard to tell what might happen in 2027.
If I could just, through the chair, add to the mayor's comment.
Sure.
Keep in mind that part of this rate increase, because we're suggesting that we're gonna issue loans, it is to support the future debt service payments of those loans, plus increases to operation and maintenance, which we've seen those charges go up. So just keep in mind that even though the project in and of itself is complete, we still have a debt service liability. Right?
And that debt service goes for 20 years
Yes.
according to the study, so.
When we go from that loan, they'll look at this study to make sure that we've got our ducks in order to pay it back.
Mr. Humberger?
And through the chair too, that this for 4% is global. Avon, and it's wholesale to French Creek, so French Creek is gonna charge Avon extra 4% as well as Sheffield Village. So this is a global increase because they have to help share the cost of running the plant. And because of the WDA rules, their rate and our rate has to be the same. So we can't increase our rate higher than their rate to pay for it. So it has to be the same based on the rules that were set up back in '76.
Good point.
10-15 years later.
Good point. Any other comments of any other?
If I may,
Yes, please.
I don't have a copy of the report, Justine, but
Sorry.
so it sounds like most of these capital improvements are for the plant itself, but if I'm not mistaken, do these costs, Corey, not also include maintenance for your trunk line? So would that potentially be an issue?
There is an ongoing study of the 14 miles, well, updating of the study for the 14 miles of the interceptor, which was, it's just increased, they're going to do a change order to do some sonic testing of the walls of the pipe, and which AECom is performing. And so that could come back, and I think we built in a 1.3, 1.4. So we put in 1.3 million for interceptor repairs. Depending on the report, that could go up or down, we don't know. That was our placeholder for that work. And the report should be done
in another month and a half. We just finished the field work.
But yeah, we did look at the interceptor. The interceptor is actually in pretty good shape.
It is.
So that is a $1.3 million project in 2024.
Any other questions or comments from, yes?
Yeah, I just had a question in regard to the impact of the 4% will have on the residents of North Ridgeville directly. I know we saw in the slideshow there, $2.25 is the cost per 100 cubic feet for the wastewater treatment. It's my understanding that the total cost per cubic foot for the residents is $6.20 per cubic foot, of which that $2.25 is a portion, I believe. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
So is the 4% applied to the $2.25, or is it going to be applied to the total $6.20?
Well, as a result of previous legislation, it is on the entire $6.20. So, you know, remember, there's a lot of different components that make up that $6.20. It is not only the fees that French Creek charges, but then we have operations and maintenance of our system itself internally. So it goes through those costs. And then there's also a third component where we have a fixed monthly fee, which goes through capital improvement projects in the sewer system. So that, you know, the $9 isn't affected by this, but the other numbers is. And so it's off of the 620, not off of the 225. But the cost that goes, the component that goes to him is going up 4%. True. Pay for his stuff.
Thank you. Any other questions from any members of council or the administration?
Good Chair.
Yes.
Question I would have on this, is it possible to show this 4% instead of as part of the rate increase, show it more as a surcharge, thereby sending the message that there's a possibility that this will end at a future date? Does that make sense?
No, because we have to send the same increase to the other communities. So it's based on volume, so we can't have like a fixed rate. I think that.
I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
because it's based upon your usage. So it'd be very hard, in fact, impossible to show it as a surcharge.
Right, we'd have to know what the volume is in order to calculate the rate, so we couldn't go backwards. We'd always be like a year behind, which would be challenging.
Sure.
So we'd be out revenue each year to cover the cost of those expenses. So that I don't see how that could work.
And all the volume to the chair, I mean, through the chair, is all the volume is through our op meters, Corey, still. It's all updated with the latest software. There has not been any further discussions as to how we're doing it, because everybody's happy with the way we're doing it. So it's based on volume, and then there's a discount for wet weather that we all share in. It's pretty complicated, but it works. So that the overall costs still come back to French Creek, and everybody pays for it.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from council or the administration?
I do.
Yes.
So if this goes retroactive to January 1, how's that gonna work with the January billing?
Actually, that's why we've asked for it to be passed with the emergency tonight, because we're doing the billing for January now. We have not done that yet. So it's always done at the end of the month. And so in order for all those other communities to get that increase, it has to be done at this meeting.
So you get a lot of phone calls when the bills come in.
Well, I understand that, yes. I get that, you know.
Fortunately, they want their toilets to flush. And not to say that they're not, but you just can't wait. Some of our 100 gross pumps were in 1976. They're still working, but they're almost dead. Look at me. I'm not almost dead.
You said it now. You know, I'm not getting any younger. These are the guys. I can tell you, thank you. Thank you. I've been around long enough to work with Corey's predecessor, along with Corey, and you know, we've always been able to stay ahead of the EPA. You know, even though that we've had a plant that needed lots of renovations, a lot of updates just to keep up. And as Corey indicated in his opening remarks, we were able to utilize this equipment and the functionality of it well beyond its useful life. And so, that goes to something to be said about the overall just general maintenance of the facility that we have. So we're getting every dollar out of it. I've always questioned, or sometimes questioned, the amount of capital improvements that we plan to go out there, because there's so many, they're so expensive, and oftentimes they don't get done within the time frame. And again, Corey explained why that happens sometimes. But it's never going to get cheaper. Okay, it's never going to be a less expensive alternative. And a 4%, we've had 4% increases in the past. It's nothing unusual. And though no one likes to see their sewer rate increased, it beats the alternative, in my opinion.
Right.
Any other questions of council or the administration?
I just want to point out, to not do stuff leads you into the situation like Lorraine. They were forced into building a giant hole in the ground. I think it was what, $100 million or something.
So it's 109 total expenditures.
Yeah, that would increase rates quite a bit. Lakewood's going through the same thing right now. They just entered into a consent decree with the EPA. In addition, I think it was the city of Elyria that did. So, I mean, you go that route, you're talking about, you think these projects are a lot, like they're now forced into. I think each one of them was over $50 million that they have to spend, maybe not as much as Lorraine, but, I mean, that just falls on the taxpayer in the end. So we've been trying to get ahead of any of our problems, these pumps that are down there, and that project's still a couple of years away, but, they're enormous. Look, when you replace anything that's as old as 1976, you're going to gain some efficiencies in operating. That, just the equipment itself is going to be better. So, we'll get some advantages out of this and be able to hopefully, control costs going forward better. But, can't not do some of these things, or else it leads into really, really bad outcomes.
If I could just speak, one of the things, the costs are rising dramatically. Like one of the head engineers from CT Consultants said there's no such thing as a $5 million project. And two reasons they're driving that. One is that the number of contractors out there that do this work is shrinking or staying the same, so they're extremely busy and they need their advice. And the other thing is there's a lot of money in the loan funds and they don't have. So the states are giving a lot of money to loan out these projects, so they know there's funding and they're always going to get contractors. And that's putting a lot of pressure on it. So that's something to keep in mind. And just to let everyone know, in order to understand the scope, if you want to stop out and go to lunch, I'll buy lunch and go out, take it to the plant, seeing some of this stuff in real life and smelling some of it. We'll go to lunch, please.
You want to eat before you. You smell before you eat, you won't want to eat.
Any other questions or comments from the administration? Any questions, comments from the public?
I do have a question, and that is, why, it's my understanding that the tap-in fee for like Avon is considerably less than the tap-in fee for North Ridgeville. Why would that be? Since they're the user and we're the owner?
Well, tap-in fees are made up of a lot of different components. Only some of the tap-in fee goes through French Creek specifically. So I can't answer as to why their fees, how many different components are there? Like 6 or something that make up?
Ours
the
are
tap-
4.
4? Okay. So French Creek is only one of those 4 for us. I don't know why they charge what they charge.
Their fee is the same as our fee when it comes to French Creek.
Correct.
Correct. But the total is a lot less.
I don't know how that's set up. They could be charging some other way.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, so basically on the last session, just hit up on Center Ridge. My question, I guess, is that one, when you were starting that project, which actually started in January, supposed to finish in June, not on, I think, I told them before you received the accepted sewer. Why was the letter put out to the public, the people in that area?
Yes, sir.
What,
That is not what it is talking about right now, unless the administration wants to answer that, but, this is about the French Creek wastewater treatment.
no, it was about the charge for tap fees.
Oh, I'm
And why,
sorry.
and why they weren't basically put out to the people in that area. When the letter was put out, where you wanted your tap to be in your property, why didn't you let the people know that basically the tap fee was gonna be $9,000 or $10,000, all of a sudden they get a surprise. My understanding is that when we did get the letter, which was back in October, you had until the end of the year to pay it. At the $9,309.03, or it was gonna go up in 2023. Why would it go up in 2023?
That's a totally separate issue than what we're talking about right
Correct,
now.
correct.
So
Okay.
let me finish this one first, but
Okay,
that's essentially because the rates go up every year, by ordinance. But on this, there is an ordinance in front of you, it's T7 tonight. We are gonna have to amend that just to account the words annually through 2027 are gonna be added to the end of that sentence where it says increase by 4%. We're gonna say annually through 2027, so kind of we're gonna drop the words above the current rate.
So that, Mr. Corcoran, under section 1, effective
Yeah.
January 1, the wholesale rate charged by French Creek wastewater treatment plants to the communities of Ridgeville, Avon, and Sheffield Village for wastewater treatment shall be increased by 4%
Annually through 2027.
annually through 2027. And then eliminate above the current rate.
Yes. I think that I'm clear on that. But he's not clear on that.
Any questions on that?
Okay, so. I'll make that motion when we go to the regular council meeting.
Okay, so you don't need that addressed here?
Well, if you want to
Yeah,
talk
we
about
can
it now and amend it now, that's fine.
Yeah, we can imagine. We can take.
So then I'll make that motion to amend T7 to change those words.
We have a motion to amend T7 2023 as the mayor just stated under section 1. Do I have a second? On the
Second.
committee? We have a second. We have a motion and a second to amend section 1 of T7 2023 for the last line to read, treatment shall be increased by 4% annually through 2027. Is there any discussion or comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to state we're gonna set this back to council for council to weigh in on. We're just making the amendment to what this was supposed to say in the first place. So, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to amend T7 2023 as just stated. Any further discussion? For the committee, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. T7 2023 is recommended to be amended. And I'll now accept a motion to have T7 2023 sent back to council for their full consideration with the amendment.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We have a couple of minutes, Cliff, on the other item on the agenda. Do you want to wait for another meeting?
I'd like to just at least talk about it for a second, and then
Sure.
we're probably gonna have to table it and schedule another meeting, Mr. Chairman. So
This is for T175 2022, an ordinance amending North Ridgeville Codified Ordinance Section 1044.02 connection charges by adding subsection L. Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is, I tried to introduce something that was simple for reasons, for an average person who lives in a single family home in the city. It's we get a sewer that you never had before. It's expensive to tie into it. Understand that sewers are necessary to health and the safety of everybody who lives in Ridgeville, but it's just expensive to do. So even in this room, coming up with $20,000 to do this work. It's a lot of money to come up with. So what this does is enable someone to budget, in my mind, that I know what my tap-in fees are gonna be. They're not gonna change. I know how to try to figure out how to come up with this cost, and they don't go up on their own because for any reason, you know, the project was delayed or there's a delay for some unforeseen reason that they can't control to delay tapping in. So this will allow them to lock in their rate and they know what they're gonna pay. They know how to try to raise those funds. Even when I talk to the health department, it could take 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever, to actually get a tap-in done. So this basically, hopefully would help anybody who had to tap in, just know what they're paying and it's locked in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the other committee members?
Well, I guess my question is, do they have to tap in when it's available or could they wait?
Through the chair, I know that you have to tap in. The health department would police that and you have 6 months to tap in and then you could talk to the health department about how to navigate that, but you have to tap in.
Okay, so it's not a case they'd be waiting like,
Right.
you know, a number of years or anything to tap in.
From what I understand from the health department, it would be very challenging to try to wait that long. It would, you know, the health department would probably take it to court. From what I understand.
If I can share,
Sure.
there are a couple exceptions to the rule, just, so you know, if they're further than 200 feet back, if their house is further than 200 feet back, they are exempt from the rule. And then there's also, you know, the health department, public health department with them, if their system is brand new, I believe they give them 7 years. There's a couple exceptions.
But we do have to move on to the next meeting, so.
There's a nutshell of what it's about.
Okay, great. If we could, I have a motion to table the,
Move the table and schedule another meeting for further discussion.
we have a motion and a second to table to a future meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. No further business before the committee. Meeting is adjourned.